Where are you watching us from? Write in the comments.
You think you know someone. You've spent years together, shared joys and struggles, built a future. Then, in one single night, everything shatters. My name is Nathan, and a month ago, I was a confident husband, a successful entrepreneur, and a happy man. But now, I'm standing in the dimly lit hall of a private club, watching my wife kiss three men and casually slip her thong into one of their pockets with a playful smile. Think this is a bad dream? I wish it were. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who second-guessed his marriage. For 10 years, Jessica and I had built a life together, good careers, a beautiful home in Los Angeles, and the kind of relationship that people envied. Or at least, that's how it used to be. Lately, something had changed, and no matter how much I told myself it was just a rough patch, the feeling in my gut told me otherwise. Jessica had become distant, cold. At first, I brushed it off. Work stress, I told myself. She was an art director at one of the biggest fashion magazines in the city, constantly dealing with high-profile designers, demanding editors and models with egos bigger than their contracts. Her job had always been hectic, but now, it felt like she lived in a completely different world, one that didn't include me anymore. The first thing I noticed was how she avoided physical contact. We used to be close. She'd kiss me on the cheek when I came home from work, pull me into bed with that teasing smile of hers, curl up next to me on the couch while we watched old movies. Now, nothing. It wasn't outright rejection, just a slow, deliberate withdrawal. A turned shoulder in bed. A tight-lipped smile instead of a real kiss. The way she stiffened when I touched her waist, like my hands didn't belong there anymore. Then there was the phone. Jessica had always been glued to her screen. It came with the territory of her job. Emails, design approvals, endless messages from her team. But this was different. She was always texting, always typing. And the moment I walked into the room, the screen went black. At first, I laughed it off, made a joke about her cheating on me with some hotshot designer. She barely even reacted, just rolled her eyes and said, "Don't be ridiculous." That should have reassured me. It didn't, because late nights at the office became routine. Because when I asked why she was working so much, she gave me vague answers. Because when I reached for her phone one evening, just to move it off the couch, she snatched it up so fast you'd think I was about to throw it out the window. "I have work messages on there," she said. "Confidential stuff." Right. I didn't press her on it. Not yet. I wanted to believe her. Needed to. But then came the biggest red flag of them all. One night, she got dressed up, really dressed up. A red silk dress that clung to her body in a way that used to be for me and me alone. The kind of dress that made men stop and stare. Hair perfect, makeup flawless. She looked incredible. And she wasn't wearing a wedding ring. "I have a client meeting," she said, grabbing her purse. Late dinner. "A client meeting?" I repeated. She gave me a quick peck on the cheek, more out of habit than affection, and walked out the door without another word. I stood there for a long time after she left, thinking, remembering the way she used to be, how she used to lean into me when she kissed me, how she used to call me after a long day just to hear my voice, how she used to wear her ring like it was a part of her. Now I was starting to realize something. Jessica wasn't pulling away because of stress. She was pulling away because there was someone else. Doubt is a parasite. Once it gets inside your head, it eats away at everything: logic, trust, reason. I wanted to believe I was imagining things, that maybe Jessica really was just overworked. But the feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I needed proof. First, I checked her joint bank accounts. If she was seeing someone, she'd slip up somewhere. Dinner charges, hotel stays, something. But everything looked normal. Groceries, bills, a couple of random online purchases. Nothing suspicious. That should have reassured me. It didn't. Because Jessica had her own personal credit card, one I never looked at because we had an agreement. I handled the investments and savings, and she handled her personal spending. No questions asked. Well, now I had questions. Jessica wasn't careless, but she wasn't a financial mastermind either. If she was hiding something, she'd make mistakes. I accessed her credit card statements through our bank's portal, and there. Expensive dinners, luxury champagne, hotel rooms, all recent, all on nights she claimed to be working late. The charges weren't daily, but they were frequent enough to paint a picture. A very clear, ugly picture. This wasn't just a one-time thing. She had a pattern, a routine. She was careful, but not careful enough. I sat in front of my laptop, staring at the numbers on the screen, trying to process what I was looking at. The dinners, 3 different high-end restaurants, all places she'd never taken me to. The champagne, top shelf, the kind you order to impress someone. The hotels, different locations, never the same one twice. Not work meetings, not client dinners, affairs. With who? I didn't know yet, but I was damn sure going to find out. I needed to see it for myself. Confronting her now wouldn't do anything. She'd lie, twist the story, make me look like the paranoid husband. No, I needed undeniable proof. So, the next time she said she had to work late, I didn't argue. I just watched. She got ready like usual. Makeup flawless. Dress sleek, sophisticated. Something that said, powerful businesswoman, but also come take me if you dare. I kissed her on the cheek before she left. Played my part. Then, 15 minutes after she walked out the door, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I kept my distance, tailing her through the busy Los Angeles streets. She drove with the confidence of someone who had done this before, like she didn't even consider the possibility of being followed. Her first stop? Her office. I waited outside, expecting her to either leave quickly or meet someone inside. But she actually went in. For an hour, nothing happened. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe she really was just working. Then, at exactly 9:45 p.m., she walked out. She wasn't alone. 2 men followed her, both sharply dressed, both from her department. They got into a cab together. I clenched my jaw and started my car, tailing them through the city. They arrived at an exclusive, members-only club in West Hollywood. The kind of place where money, power, and secrets mix freely. Jessica stepped out of the cab, laughing at something one of the men said. She looked different. Not like my wife. Like someone else entirely. Confident, playful, dangerous. I watched from my car as they walked past the velvet ropes, flashing membership cards. Jessica didn't even hesitate. She belonged here. I didn't follow. Not yet. Confronting her here wouldn't get me what I needed. If she was bold enough to be seen with other men in public, then there was more to this than I realized. I needed more than just suspicion. I needed proof. I parked half a block away, engine off, watching as Jessica and the 2 men disappeared through the club's entrance. The place was exclusive. Private membership, no cameras, high-profile clientele. The kind of place where people paid for discretion. A place built for secrets. I should have gone home. Should have let it go and told myself I was overthinking things. But I didn't. I stayed. The club sat on a quiet, upscale street in West Hollywood, nestled between designer boutiques and rooftop lounges. A pair of security guards flanked the entrance, only nodding at those who belonged. The people coming and going weren't your average nightclub crowd. No college kids, no drunken tourists, just men in tailored suits and women in dresses that cost more than a mortgage payment. Jessica belonged here. I sat back in my seat, watching, waiting. My mind raced through 1,000 possibilities. Had she been here before? Was this her usual spot? Did she meet different men each time, or were these 2 the ones she'd been entertaining for a while? I needed to be smart. If I barged in now, all I'd get was her playing innocent. She'd tell me it was a work outing, that I was overreacting. She'd get defensive, twist the situation, turn it on me. No, I needed proof, so I stayed put. Minutes dragged into an hour. I watched people filter in and out, each one looking like they had something to hide. I imagined Jessica inside, drinking, laughing, maybe pressed up against one of those men in a dimly lit booth. The thought made my blood boil. I clenched my jaw, reminding myself of the plan. At 11:30 p.m., the doors finally opened. Jessica stepped out, flanked by the two men. She wasn't stumbling. She wasn't drunk. If anything, she looked more alive than I'd seen her in months. She had a glow to her. Lips slightly parted, eyes sharp, a smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. One of the men placed a hand on the small of her back, and she didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into it, just slightly, just enough to tell me everything I needed to know. She liked it. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to stay calm. They walked toward the curb, still laughing, still caught in their own little world. Jessica tossed her hair over one shoulder, giving the man beside her a slow, knowing smile. A smile I hadn't seen in a long time. Not with me, anyway. She didn't even look at her phone. No late night at the office excuse. No last-minute text to me about how exhausted she was. She wasn't thinking about me at all. A cab pulled up, and all three of them climbed inside. I started my car and followed. The cab weaved through the city, heading toward downtown. I kept a few cars behind, making sure not to get too close. I'd never followed anyone before, not like this. But it was easier than I expected. Jessica never looked back. She didn't check to see if anyone was watching. That told me everything. She wasn't nervous, because she'd done this before. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to keep my emotions in check. The worst part wasn't just a betrayal. It was how effortless it was for her. The ease with which she walked out of our home, into another life, without a second thought. After about 20 minutes, the cab turned onto a quieter street, lined with luxury hotels and high-end bars. Then it stopped. I pulled over a safe distance away, cutting my headlights. Jessica and the two men stepped onto the sidewalk, still talking, still laughing. One of them, tall, dark-haired, expensive watch, said something that made her smile. Then she touched his arm. They disappeared into the entrance of a 5-star hotel. No hesitation, no looking back. I drove home in silence. No radio, no distractions, just the hum of the engine and the shock of what I'd seen. My wife, stepping into a 5-star hotel with two men, touching one of them like he was hers. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet. The same place where we'd built a life together, where we'd laughed, fought, celebrated, and planned for a future that, now, felt like a lie. Jessica wouldn't be home for hours. Maybe not at all. I sat in the dark, staring at nothing, my mind running through every possible scenario. I needed more than just a suspicion, more than just seeing her enter that hotel. I needed proof, something undeniable. And then I remembered the iPad. Jessica had an old iPad she'd stopped using after I bought her a new MacBook last year. She never got rid of it, just left it in the bottom drawer of her nightstand. She probably forgot it even existed. I went to the bedroom, pulled it out, and powered it up. The screen lit up, asking for a passcode. I tried her usual, our anniversary. Nothing. Her birth year. Nope. Then I tried something I knew she'd never expect me to guess. The same passcode she used years ago when we first moved in together. The screen unlocked. I exhaled slowly. Jessica was meticulous, but she was also predictable. The iPad had barely anything on it. No emails, no social media apps. But when I opened Safari, I saw a list of saved passwords. One of them caught my eye immediately. Telegram. I clicked on it. The password auto-filled. I hesitated for half a second before pressing login, and then I saw everything. The chat list wasn't long, just a few names. But the messages told me everything I needed to know. Jessica wasn't just cheating. She had an entire system. I opened the most recent conversation, a thread with someone named Ethan. Ethan, Friday night, private suite. There'll be 4 of us. I'll be in red, no underwear. Jessica had liked the message. I clicked on another chat. James, that dress you wore last time? Fucking perfect. Can't wait to see it on the floor again. And another. Mason, I want you first this time. Last time was too rushed. This wasn't some emotional affair. This was habitual. Jessica had multiple men. I scrolled through the messages, skimming through weeks of conversations. They weren't romantic. No, I miss you, or I love you. Just arrangements. Dates, locations, what to wear, what to expect. She was cold, efficient, like this was a business transaction. Jessica had played me for a fool, but she had no idea that I was about to play her right back. I closed the iPad and set it down, staring at the wall in the dim light of our bedroom. My breathing was steady. The shock had settled, numbed by something colder, calculated focus. Jessica thought she was untouchable. She had her secret world, her carefully managed affairs, her private nights in luxury hotels with men who weren't her husband. She had covered her tracks well enough that most men wouldn't have caught on. But I wasn't most men. I built a cybersecurity company from the ground up. I spent my career uncovering hidden information, tracking patterns, and predicting human behavior. She thought she was smarter than me. She was wrong. I needed more than text. I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't spin or explain away. And now I knew exactly where to find it. The club. That was the key. That's where she felt safe. That's where she let her guard down. I needed a way inside. I grabbed my laptop and started digging. The club was exclusive, but exclusivity is just a wall waiting to be broken. It had a private online community, a Telegram group for members to coordinate events, discuss upcoming parties, and, in some cases, arrange private meetups. Jessica was already in it. I wasn't about to message her from her own account. That was too obvious. Instead, I created a new identity, a wealthy newcomer looking for something exciting. Within an hour, I was inside the group. The chat was filled with coded messages. Friday night, same suite as last time. DM for details. Private event, upscale only. Vetted members only. I watched how people interacted, learned the language they used. The club operated on reputation. You didn't just show up. You had to be invited. So I played the role. I sent a private message to one of the organizers. Me, looking for something exclusive, willing to contribute. Discretion required. A few minutes later, a response. Host new. Me, new to the city, not to the scene. Silence. Then, host, big spenders only. Entry fee is $5,000. No exceptions. I didn't hesitate. Me, done. I wired the money through a burner account, one I set up months ago for business security reasons. Now, it had a new purpose. A few minutes later, the details arrived. Private suite, Friday night. The same event Jessica was attending. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The trap was set. She had no idea that the next time she walked into that club, she wouldn't just be cheating. She'd be caught. Friday night came faster than I expected. The plan was simple: blend in, observe, and strike at the right moment. I wasn't going in blind. I had studied everything. The club's atmosphere, the kind of men that frequented it, the way Jessica behaved. I dressed the part, sharp black suit, no tie, expensive watch. Not too flashy, but enough to make sure I didn't stand out as an outsider. These men had money, power, and a certain arrogance. I had to be one of them. I arrived at the club just before 10 p.m. Inside, it was exactly what I expected. Dim lighting, soft jazz playing in the background, the scent of expensive cigars and aged whiskey. Men in tailored suits, women draped over their arms like accessories. Conversations were low, intimate, like every word carried a secret. This wasn't just a place to drink and socialize. This was a hunting ground, and Jessica was right at home in it. I spotted her almost instantly. She was seated at a round table near the back, her red dress standing out against the deep mahogany and gold tones of the club's decor. She wasn't alone. 3 men surrounded her. I recognized them immediately: Ethan, James, Mason, the same men from her Telegram chats. They were close, their body language dripping with familiarity. Ethan, the dark-haired one, leaned in to whisper something in her ear. She smiled, lips parting just slightly. James poured her another drink, and Mason's hand rested lazily on her thigh. She didn't move it. She didn't even flinch. I tightened my grip on my glass, forcing myself to stay composed. I was an observer, nothing more. Not yet. Then, right in front of me, Jessica did something that made my blood turn to ice. She slid her hand under the table, lifted the hem of her dress ever so slightly, just enough to hook her fingers around the waistband of her red thong. And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she pulled it down. Not all the way, just enough to slip it off, neat and practiced. She balled it in her fist, smirked, and leaned over to Mason, slipping it into his pocket like it was a love note. Mason grinned. James chuckled, swirling his drink. Ethan leaned back, watching her like a predator who had already won. And Jessica? She just sipped her champagne like it was nothing, like she hadn't just given a piece of herself to another man while her husband sat a few feet away. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I kept to the shadows, watching her fade into another life, a life where I didn't exist. Jessica sat between the 3 men, leaning back in her chair with ease. She was no longer the cold, distant wife I'd known her for the last few months. She was laughing, glowing, entirely in the moment. Ethan, tall, confident, slightly casual, leaned closer, his lips almost touching her ear. He whispered something and she nodded, clutching her champagne glass. James, more reserved but attentive, ran his fingertips along her wrist, as if testing her reaction. Mason relaxed, idly touched her thigh, his hand moving slightly higher with each breath she took. She didn't stop him. On the contrary, she crossed her legs, leaning forward slightly, letting her dress reveal more skin. Everything about her movement said, "I like it. I want it." I couldn't tear my eyes away, not because I needed proof. I already knew, but because I wanted to see the limit of her betrayal. My glass was filled with whiskey, but I never took a sip. I just watched. Jessica ran her hand along the table, slowly slid down, hit her palm under the fabric of her dress. Her fingers touched her thigh, a little further. Then, with a sharp but confident movement, she pulled her lace panties off. I almost heard the sound, the thin fabric between her fingers. I couldn't breathe. She didn't make a show of it. She didn't act out a scene. Everything was too natural, as if it was supposed to be that way. And here's the cherry on the cake. She turned to Mason, smiled, and stuffed the underwear into his pocket. She glanced up at him, a challenge or a promise. Mason smiled slowly. James swirled the alcohol in his glass, his gaze sliding over her body, as if he already knew what she would look like under it. Ethan watched silently, content, relaxed, like a man confident in the outcome of a game. And Jessica? She simply picked up her glass again, took a slow sip, as if it were an ordinary evening, as if she hadn't given in completely, as if her husband hadn't been sitting a few meters away, watching this performance. I clutched the phone, pressed record. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I had recorded everything. Her smile, her compliance, her betrayal. No more excuses, no more excuses. Just the truth. She had passed the point of no return, and I was going to destroy her. I didn't rush it. I let them enjoy their moment. Let Jessica sink deeper into her fantasy world where she thought she was untouchable. She leaned into Mason's shoulder now, her fingers lazily tracing circles on the back of his hand. James whispered something in her ear that made her smirk, and Ethan sat back, watching her like he already owned her. They were comfortable. Too comfortable. I took my time walking toward their table, weaving through the crowd with quiet precision. My heartbeat was steady. My mind was clear. I had everything I needed: the footage, the messages, the undeniable truth. Jessica had made her choices. Now, it was time for her to face the consequences. I reached their table just as Mason was about to slide his hand even higher up her thigh. Then I pressed play. The club wasn't loud, but it wasn't silent either. Conversations hummed, glasses clinked, laughter echoed through the dimly lit space. But when her voice filled the air, everything stopped. Friday night private suite. There'll be 4 of us. I'll be in red, no underwear. Jessica's voice, crystal clear. Every syllable dripped with betrayal. The table froze. Mason's hand snapped back like he had just touched fire. James stiffened, his smirk vanishing. Ethan's relaxed expression turned into a cold, assessing stare. But Jessica, she went pale. For the first time in months, I saw real emotion on her face. Not apathy, not that distant coldness she had perfected around me. Pure, unfiltered shock. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine. I saw the exact second it clicked, when she realized she wasn't in control anymore. I raised my phone slightly, the screen still playing the recording. Her messages, her whispers, her promises to these men, the proof of her double life, right there for everyone to hear. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She wasn't ready for this. She thought she was careful and smart. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of the moment settle over the table. Then I spoke. "Having a good time, sweetheart." Jessica flinched like I had struck her. Mason cleared his throat, pushing his chair back slightly. James avoided my gaze, suddenly fascinated with his drink. Ethan, to his credit, didn't move. He just watched, calculating. Jessica finally found her voice, but it was weak, fragile. "Nathan, I can explain." I let out a sharp breath, almost a laugh. "Explain?" I tapped the phone screen, skipping ahead in the recording. "I want you first this time. Last time was too rushed." James' words. Jessica had responded with a heart emoji, her own confirmation that she had done this before. The color drained from her face completely. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Go ahead, Jess. Explain." She opened her mouth, closed it. There was nothing she could say. No excuse, no lie, no carefully crafted manipulation that could rewrite the truth. I had ripped away her mask in front of the very people she was trying to impress. Jessica's breath came in short, uneven gasps. Trapped. That's what she looked like. Like an animal cornered with nowhere to run. The power she held over these men, over this secret life of hers, was slipping through her fingers. The men at the table weren't looking at her the same way anymore. Mason, who had been touching her just minutes ago, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his hand moving away. James looked irritated, like he had just realized he was caught in something messy, something beneath him. And Ethan? He was still watching, eyes sharp, but his interest wasn't in Jessica anymore. It was in me, calculating, measuring. The way men do when they're trying to assess if the person across from them is a threat. But Jessica, she wasn't assessing anything. She was panicking. She reached out, her fingers brushing my wrist. "Nathan, let's talk. In private." I laughed, loudly, sharply, the kind of laugh that made people turn their heads. "Private?" I repeated, looking around the club, my voice just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "You weren't too worried about private when you were spreading your legs for 3 different guys, were you?" A murmur ran through the people around us. Heads turned. The whisper started, judging, staring, watching. Jessica recoiled like I had slapped her. Please don't do this, she hissed, voice trembling. Not here. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. Oh, I see. You don't want an audience? I glanced at Mason. Funny, I thought you liked an audience. His jaw clenched. Jessica's face twisted, her eyes darting around the room. She was searching for an escape. There wasn't one. Not anymore. I pulled my phone up again, raising the volume. Jessica's voice filled the space around us. God, I love when you... She lunged forward, trying to snatch the phone from my hand. I pulled it back easily, stepping just out of reach. Aha, I chided. No more hiding. She was shaking now. Really shaking. Nathan, please. I'm begging you. That made me pause. Begging. Jessica never begged. Not for me. Not for anything. It was too late for that now. I turned my attention to the three men. They had already started distancing themselves, their faces carefully neutral, like they were already crafting their denials in case this got worse. I made it worse. Mason, I said, my voice almost friendly. You might want to return what she gave you earlier. Something red, lacy, real personal? The color drained from his face. Jessica gasped. Nathan, stop. I wasn't stopping. I looked at Ethan next. And you? I played another voice note, one where she moaned his name. You must feel real special, huh? Thought she was just yours. Ethan's eyes darkened. Not at me. At Jessica. The men were done with her now. Jessica's world was collapsing. She let out a strangled sob, her hands shaking. I'll do anything. Just stop this. I smiled. Cold. Detached. You already did enough, sweetheart. Then I turned and walked away. And this time, she was the one left behind. I left the club without looking back, but I could still feel the weight of Jessica's silence pressing against my back. The way her world had collapsed in front of everyone. The way the men who once adored her now looked at her like she was nothing. The whispers had started before I even reached the door. Her name wasn't Jessica anymore. It was scandal. It was betrayal. It was a cautionary tale. I should have felt relief. Maybe even satisfaction. I had burned her lies to the ground, left her standing in the ruins of everything she thought she could keep hidden. So, why, as I walked down the street, did I feel like something was still missing? When I got home, I moved like a man who had already made up his mind. Jessica's side of the closet, empty. Her wedding ring on the nightstand, tossed into a drawer. The memories of us, buried. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. She wasn't my wife. Not really. Just a woman I had once loved. A woman I had built a life with, only to find out I was just another piece in her game. I took my phone and opened the Telegram group, the one she used to arrange her nights of betrayal. I hovered over the videos, the messages, the proof. For a second, I considered sending it to everyone, her boss, her friends, her family. Let them see what kind of person she really was. But then, I did something else. I deleted the chat. Not because she deserved mercy. She didn't. But because I was done being part of her story. Let her crawl through the wreckage of her own making. I was walking away. Or at least, that's what I thought. It was past midnight when my phone rang. Jessica hadn't come home. I didn't expect her to. Maybe she was still at the club, trying to salvage what little dignity she had left. Maybe she was knocking on some other man's door, looking for comfort. Didn't matter. But when I saw the caller ID, private number, a strange unease settled in my gut. I almost ignored it. Almost. I answered. Silence. Then a breath. Slow. Controlled. Not Jessica. Then a voice, low, measured. Too familiar. Nathan, you don't know the whole story. My grip tightened around the phone. Who is this? A quiet chuckle. Cold. Detached. Then a click. The line went dead. I pulled the phone away, staring at the screen, heart pounding. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. For weeks, I had thought I was the one uncovering the truth, that I was the one putting the pieces together, exposing Jessica's secrets. But now, how do you think what happened?